If you will, take your Bibles and turn to Psalms 23 this morning. Psalms 23. Let's look at it together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me by the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. How many of you can probably quote that? I'm not going to make you do that this morning. I know some of you were as I was reading. I have a few hands going up. That's probably the most well-known of all the chapters in the entire Bible is Psalms 23. But this morning, I'm going to really try to challenge us to see it as more than just something that we say at a funeral, or more than something we just put on a coffee cup or hang on our wall in our house. I want to show you the value of this psalm. Matter of fact, as we were going through the picking the psalms, as we're taking the psalms in the summer, and we're going, man, what psalms are we going to share from God's word? Immediately, I said, I want to preach Psalms 23. And then, as we were setting out the calendar, we were like we're going to have someone else here this morning that will be preaching from Psalms 32, and we'd have to skip 23. And I was going, oh man, I really wanted to preach Psalms 23. And then it worked it out so that I could preach Psalms 23. So man, I am really excited to share with you from this chapter in the Bible that means a lot to me. And I hope by the end you'll see a bigger picture, if you haven't already, of what Psalms 23 is all about, so that it really kind of hits home. How many of you have ever heard the phrase, better than I deserve? You ever heard that phrase, better than I deserve? We say that a lot down here. I've got a friend of mine that anytime you ask him, how you doing? He says, oh, I'm doing better than I deserve, better than I deserve. And it really means that God is treating me so well, he's treating me better than I deserve. I love it when I hear a man say, well, my wife treats me better than I deserve. Well, this is a phrase that I think could really be applied to Psalms 23, that God treats us better than we deserve. You can't help but read Psalms 23 and go, wow, God, you really do treat me better than I deserve. Verse 1, we're going to look at that because it's really the key to the whole chapter. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I mean, that phrase right there from the very beginning, you know exactly what this chapter is about. You don't have to be a great theologian. You don't have to be a great pastor. You don't have to be a scholar with a bunch of commentaries to understand that this chapter boils down to one point, and that is the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. If the Lord is your shepherd, then all your needs are supplied, is what David is saying. This morning, David is simply saying, whatever need arose in my life, the shepherd was there. All throughout my life, I can look back and see God's hand of protection upon my life. David wrote Psalms 23 not when he was a young man. He wrote Psalms 23 as an old man, looking back over his life and seeing God's provision. I know that I had preached from Psalms 23 when I was a young man. And I tell you, it doesn't mean as much to me then as it does now. Being an older man and having grayer hair, I can look at Psalm 23 and go, wow, what a statement and how true it is. The Lord has been my shepherd, and I shall not want. The Lord is my shepherd. Who is the shepherd? The Lord is. Who is Lord? Pastor Nancy shared last week, Yahweh. It's the same Lord here again. Yahweh. The I am. The provider. When Moses was in the wilderness and he's crying out and he's saying, God, Who shall I say sent me? What is your name? You never told us your name, God. What name do I use? And God shouted back or spoke back, the I am, Yahweh, your provider. Tell Israel that I will provide for them. Yahweh, the provider, is my shepherd. God is saying today, I'm still Yahweh. I am still your provider. I am still your shepherd. I still meet your needs. Well, who is this Yahweh? What's his resume? Well, take this book in your hand, the Bible. I wish I had brought one of my thick Bibles in now, because it would make a bigger point. But look at your Bible and realize that this is God's resume. All throughout the pages is God providing for mankind. And as you look at the Bible, you realize that he is Yahweh. He is the I am. He is the provider. That God has all the qualifications necessary to take care of my life. He has the capacity required to handle the job. Not only is he managing to take care of over 10 billion followers today. I don't know if you've seen the video yet. Somebody posted online. But it's a really cool video. It's a young lady that's laying on her back on a blanket in a park, and she's like staring up in the sky. And it's like you just see the picture of her, and then it just keeps pulling away and going further and further and further and further back. And it goes up to the clouds, and you can barely see her. And then you can't see her at all. You just see the continent of the United States, or not continent, the country of the United States, and then you see the continents, and then you see the world, and then it goes all the way through the space and all the way out through the galaxy, and the galaxy's far away. And you go, whoa, and then it comes all the way back, woo, and it goes through all that till you see her face again. And then it doesn't stop there. It goes into her eye, and it goes into her head, and it shows you it goes all the way down to that one atom in her, somewhere in her head. And it's just really cool. And then it pulls it back up, and you're left going, wow, how big is God? That God is taking care of 2 billion people that are on the planet, and he sees each one of us as his children individually. He knows our name. He knows what's going on in our life, and he loves us. And not only is he taking care of that, but every day, man, he is taking care of keeping the rivers flowing, letting the breeze blow, letting the flower and trees grow. Should I call that rhyming? I worked hard on that, guys. Keeping our planet moving. But David is saying now, as an old man who has faced all kind of adversity and tragedy in life, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. The rest of the psalm identifies the areas of God's provision. And it takes care of every area in our life. And I got to show it to you real quick this morning. Because when you get back and you pull back away from this chapter, you go, wow, God treats me better than I deserve. The first need he meets is our spiritual need. Look at verse 2. He maketh me to lie down in the green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. David's first message is to those who are spiritually tired, to those who are spiritually drained, to those who have gone through a hard season in life, who have been fighting the good fight of faith, but they become weak. And you're probably wondering, where is God? And David is saying, he hasn't left you. He hasn't forsaken you. He's saying, the Lord is your shepherd. You shall not want. David is saying, the shepherd is not checked out on you. He is still there. He is still your provision. David knows what he's talking about. Because there were times in David's life where he felt like God checked out on him. and felt like he was lost, felt like he was drained, felt like he was tired and thirsty. Matter of fact, Psalm 63:11, David says, my soul, it thirsts for you. My flesh, it longs for you in a dry and thirsty land where there is no water. Have you ever been there? David said he's been there. And if we're telling the truth, all of us have probably been there a time or two. But David, having watched God's hand in his life over and over again, is saying, look, in those times, God is going to show up. In those times, God is going to bring water for your thirsty mouth. In those times, God is going to feed your soul. In those times, God is going to restore your soul. Why is it that at times we feel drained? Well, because 1 John tells us that we have enemies. We have the world that we're fighting against. We have our flesh that we're fighting against. We have our enemy, Satan, that we're warring against. And yet, we have a shepherd who is taking us to cool waters and helping us drink. Sometimes we just need to know and realize that God is holding us up. When I was a teenager, I took a lot of swimming classes. Eventually, I even went through and took the lifeguard class. And so then down through the years, I've had the opportunity to teach a lot of people how to swim. Maybe not a lot, but several. And I've noticed something. And it's something that I've watched in all the classes I ever took. As I watch hanging out at pools all the time, most people that can't swim are usually genuinely afraid of the water. And in order to teach someone how to swim who's generally afraid of the water, you got to get them used to the water. So what you do is you have them sit on the side of the pool, put their feet in, just to kind of get them a little bit wet. And then if you've been around the water enough, you know how to take your hands and clasp them together and make the water squirt out like that, cool. And you kind of play around with them a little bit, and you kind of get them wet by doing that to them. Because you don't want to just walk up and splash them right in the face. But what you want to do is you just want to get them wet. So they kind of say, okay, the water's not so bad. It's okay. And then you ask them to come around and get in the shallow end and get into the pool with you. They're going, okay, I can do this. I'm wet. It's all right. I'll get in the pool. Most of them will get up, and they'll come around. They'll get in the pool, and they're all right because they got both legs on the ground. The water's about right here, so they're cool. And then you tell them, all right, I want you to hold your nose, and I want you to go under the water and come back up. And they'll look at you with big eyes, but you'll say, you can do it. I know you can do it. Come on, watch me. And okay, now let's do it together. And you'll take them down. They'll come right back up, and they'll do it because their feet are firmly planted on the ground, and they feel like pretty safe. The next step will determine whether they swim or not. Because the next step, you're going to say, can you do this for me? I want you to float on your back, and I will hold you up with my hand under your back. But I need you to trust me and float on your back. If they take that step, they're going to learn how to swim. If they don't take that step, they're probably not going to ever learn how to swim. Can they trust you as the instructor to hold them up? Have you won their trust enough that they will say, yeah, I believe you can hold me up in the water? I really believe there are times that God is just there holding us up, where we have to trust God to lean back and trust God to hold us up, to restore our soul. For some of us, like a swimming instructor, God is making us lie down. Remember the passage? He maketh me lie down in green pastures. Lying down when you feel like everything in your world is exploding around you is really tough, because that means you're going to trust God, that God is going to fight your battle for you. You're going to lie down. You're going to rest. You're going to let Him hold you up. And that's what he's saying. He's saying he's going to lead you beside still waters. Notice they're not rushing waters. Notice they're quiet, peaceful water that you can drink from. That he's going to restore your soul. Secondly, he's going to meet your directional need. It says, he leadeth me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Not only is he going to meet my spiritual need, but he's going to meet my directional need. Life is full of decisions and choices. As a follower of Christ, I think each one of us in here, I think you'd agree with me, we want to make the God choice, right? We want to follow God's direction. And no doubt about it, if we could turn back the clock, many of us would go, you know what, I made a mistake here. I shouldn't have gone this direction. I would have wished I would have gone this way, but, I didn't hear from God right. Or I wasn't even following God at the time. And I wish I could go back and change some of the choices I made. The truth of the matter is that God wants to lead and he wants to guide us. In order for God to lead and guide us, remember verse 2 as you look at verse 3. Because you got to slow down in order for God to lead you. Back in the fall of last year, my wife came up with this brainchild idea that we would go to a corn maze as a family and go through the corn maze during Halloween season. And then in the corn maze, they have all these people with chainsaws and monsters jumping out at you and little evil people, creature-looking things jumping out at you, and to go through the corn maze. Christian, did you go with us? He was working that day. But Lauren and Hayden went, Ashlyn went, Gidget went, and I went. Here's the thing with those corn mazes. They want you to run. They want you to go fast. So they have these characters out there so that you're not focusing on where you're going. You're just going fast. And the faster you go, the loster you get. So the idea is to keep you moving quickly, and keep you in that corn maze until they turn the lights off. Because what you have to do in order to get out of the corn maze, we found out, is you don't just follow another group, because the other group may not know where they're going either. What you have to do is you have to slow down, and you have to look up at the sky, either find the North Star, or you got to find where the tower is that they have out there. Because they got this huge tower to find those who never find their way out of the corn maze at the end with a big spotlight. And you look for that tower, and you get your direction from that, and then you begin to walk. And you can't walk fast. You can't speed up. I don't know if you've ever been to the Spartanburg Regional Hospital, but that is a huge hospital. When the first time I went there, I got so lost in that hospital. Matter of fact, I went to see Steve Bailey, I believe. And as I was in the hospital seeing Steve, I came out, and it was like about 1 a.m. And I didn't know where I was going, and I got confused. And you know what you do when you get confused? You walk faster. It's a natural reaction. You walk faster. So you're not really paying attention as much because you're walking so fast that you're not thinking. Before I knew it, I ended up in the morgue. Down in the basement of the hospital. I would have never got out of there if I went somewhere on the 3rd or 4th floor and ran into Beryl again. I said, Beryl, get me out of this hospital because I am directionally challenged. And you put me in that big of a maze, I'm not going to get out of that place. The problem is you begin to walk faster. Same thing happens when you drive and you're lost. What do? You speed up. You got to slow down. If you want to hear God's voice and you're looking for direction, I know our world is going at a fast pace, but you got to blow the whistle and stop. And you got to get alone and spend time with God to hear his voice. If not, he will make you lay down in green pastures. Slow down. Because God wants you. He wants to lead you. He wants to guide you. He wants to take you where he's going. He wants to lead you in paths of righteousness. Number 3, emotional need. I hope by now you're seeing this psalm is more than just a cup of coffee to put on a wall somewhere and look at, but you're seeing it as a God who supplies all your needs, as a shepherd that you have that you shall not want. But in verse 4, he says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Now we see a shepherd who will meet our emotional needs. What is David's emotional need? He's fearful. He's saying, I learned through my life that when I had fear, that God took me through those times of fear. I mean, he was, after all, being chased for his life by King Saul. I mean, Saul literally tried to kill him on multiple occasions, where he just moved to the right or to the left at the last second to dodge a spear, where he literally had his life weighing in the balance. And then as the king of Israel, he was constantly under attack from those who were trying to take his throne from him. He was always kind of living in the state of, am I going to die today or am I going to live today? And he understood that in times when he was afraid, that he could trust God, that he had a shepherd that would take care of him. He says, I will fear no evil. Why? Because you are with me. Your presence is there. That if we are going through an emotional time, whether it's fear, whether it's anger, where it's just anxiety, whatever it may be, we need to understand that we need to run to the presence of God. For you are with me. When our kids were little and yours were too, when a storm came up, what happened? They wanted to get in the bed with you, or they wanted you to get in the bed with them because they were afraid. But your presence in the middle of the storm helped calm them down. When we would leave our kids, our girls in particular, and we were gone overnight somewhere, and they would be afraid of us leaving them at night, they would want to have Gidget's nightgown. And they would sleep with Gidget's nightgown. And Gidget would take her body spray and spray it on it so it smelled like her. And they would hold her nightgown, especially Ashlyn, as she went to bed at night. Ashlyn's going, no, me, Dad, you shouldn't have said that. But it came out, baby. But she would hold that nightgown, and it would remind her of her mother's presence because she could smell her mother all over the gown. There are times when our emotions are getting the best of us, where we need to run to the presence of God, that we sense and smell his presence. And you go, God, you are there. You're the shepherd who keeps us. He says, his rod and his staff, they comfort me. I think you probably know this, but let me just remind you. The rod was like the little police club that he held in his hand, that he would beat any attacker who came against the sheep. It represents God's power in our life, that God has the power to deliver us from any enemy we face. That the rod says, my God is a delivering God, that no enemy will overtake me, for my God will fight my battles. He is my help. And his staff, it represents God's grace, because the staff was used for the sheep when they went off into a ravine, and the shepherd had to take the staff and pull it back up. It represents God's grace in our life. When we get off the path, when we get off the way we're supposed to go, and we fall in the ditch, that God comes and he lifts us up. It's God's grace. And how many times do we need God's grace? When we have blown it. That God's grace is there. That God is with me through all the emotional challenges of life. One day we were driving down 85, Gidget and I were, when, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or so, and we were driving down the interstate, and we were listing all this article that I found. And this article says, if you had these things happen in your life and you're married, you should be divorced. Or it's highly likely you'll be divorced. So I began to read the list. One of the things was if you had a death in your family recently. One of the things was if you had financial struggles. Another was if you had a job change. Another was if you had a childbirth recently. Another was if you moved into a new location. I don't know, out of the 20 things, I think we hit like about 16 of them. And I looked at her and said, we should be divorced. And we both started laughing. Because the reality is, and you looked at that, man, you went through a lot during that period in your life, but it didn't tear you apart. And you're probably going through the same thing. Why? Because you had the presence of God. You had the presence of God. So that when your emotions and were getting out of hand and you were struggling with that, you had somewhere to run to, someone to go to. You had a shepherd that says, you shall not want. He meets our physical needs. Look at verse 5. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, and my cup does what? It runneth over. David is talking about the most basic of needs, our physical needs. You can't live without it, without him. David is saying this. He's saying, God, my most physical need, the need of food when I was on the run, in the presence of my enemy, when Saul was after me and I was hiding in the cave, God, you provided my meal for me. You took care of me. Howard, put the picture up. That's Gidget and I, years ago. This is about how old Ashlyn and Christian were. They were a little bit younger than that when we first came here. Lauren and Christian. But I found this picture, and I just had to show you to it just to make you smile and laugh. But also just to give God testimony. It was a time in our life where we were just going through a rough season, and we needed a vacation. We needed time away. And so I had talked to Gidget, and we were both, she wasn't working, and we were living on the salary that the church provided here. And so we didn't have a lot. And so I said, we need a break. But we didn't have money to go anywhere. And Gidget said, well, Lee, you've been preaching on favor. Why don't you just believe God and let's go? I was like, well, I know, but honey, we don't have any in the bank account. I said, how can we just go? And she says, Lee, we just need to go. And so she challenged me, and so I got a speaker for that next Sunday, and I told the church next Sunday we'll be out of town that weekend. We'll be gone. And so it was really kind of neat to see. On Wednesday night, we were getting ready to have church on that service, and as I came walking down this side, after I turned on the soundboard and all, came walking down, Clarence Bailey, who's now going home to be with the Lord, he came around the corner. He said, Pastor, he says, you're going on vacation. You need some money. And he handed me some money in my hand. And it was a good bit of money, but he handed it to me, and so I put it away, and I said, wow, Lord, thank you for the provision. And then we went down, so we were going down to Charleston. We stopped at my mom and dad's house, and my mom, they usually don't give us money. That's just not their thing. But my mom came up and she said, Lee, I think you need some money this time. And she handed me some money in my hand. I went, wow, God, you provided. And then we got down to Charleston. We got down and we were out there walking around, and we're down, where the area is, where the water is, where the little park area kind of is, and the battery, the thing. And we were walking around, and all of a sudden this person came running up, and they handed us a coupon to stay at the Hampton Inn, which is like one of the nice hotels. I looked it up online today. If you want to stay there this week, it's $400 a night. They handed me a coupon for $59 to stay there. I looked at it and looked at Gidget. I said, well, I guess we get to spend the night. We can spend a couple nights. Look at this. We got enough money to spend a couple nights here. This is really cool. So we went to the Hampton Inn. We made our reservations, unloaded our stuff because we didn't know if we were going to stay there or not. We thought we might just drive back to my mom and dad's house and then go back again the next day. And we unloaded everything in the hotel, and we started walking around. And so the first night, we just walked all the way to the end of the battery, and then we walked all the way back. Christian was about to die about halfway through. I had to carry him half the trip. See how big that boy was back then? I had to carry him. And Lauren was whining, her feet, my feet are hurting, but we made it back. We got back in the hotel, and then the next morning we got up and we went down. We went down to the slave market, which is really not a slave market. It's just what they call it. They didn't really sell slaves there. But we were going through and looking at all the different things, and we went into an ice cream store. And the kids were looking. I don't know if Lauren just had that look like, I really need an ice cream cone or not. But the man just at the counter just gave our kids ice cream cones. That does not happen in Charleston. They charge you for everything. But he says, I said, oh, we can't this time. And he says, oh, no, it's on me. And just provided for our kids ice cream. So then we walked all the way down towards where they were doing the carriage rides, where the picture's taken here. And we got down there, and we found out this particular company that I don't think it's every 10 riders or something, they give free rides. Well, guess who won? We won a free ride. We got in there and went to the whole tour of Charleston on the carriage ride, totally paid for by God. He just took care of us. We got off there. We went down and we went to a candy store. Kid you not, they gave Lauren free candy at the candy store. It was like the weirdest thing. I was like, whoa. And we went out to eat, and we got a good coupon from somebody gave us that we were able to eat really cheap. And it was just like totally amazing how God took care and was our shepherd and provided for that entire weekend that we needed away. Amen? And that's God. That's not me. That's God. And I'm going to tell you, when I think back and look at that, I know God meets our physical needs. He meets our physical needs. He is our provider. I can tell you stories of when people in our church that didn't have much and saw how God supplied their need at the right time. He meets our eternal needs. Look at verse 6. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever and ever. Surely goodness and mercy, his goodness and his mercy, like two shepherd dogs, follow us throughout our life. Goodness, I love the word goodness in the Bible. It's one of my favorite words in Hebrew in the Old Testament. It's the word hesed, and it means God's loving kindness. God uses this over and over again with Israel at times. You'll read about God's goodness to Israel or God's loving kindness to Israel as you read through the Old Testament. It says hesed. Remember, Jack, when Dr. Vecchi taught us that word? Oh, man. He would talk about how Israel was running from God, and yet God would demonstrate his loving kindness towards Israel. In our lives, as we journey through life, God just demonstrates his loving kindness towards us when we don't sometimes even deserve it, because he treats us better than we deserve. And then his mercy in the fact that it's treating us with not what we deserve, but what we don't deserve. He's always supplying, always giving. When we fall in the ditch, he's always there to help us out. When this life is over, you and I have the opportunity to live in his house forever. Forever. There was a swimmer, since the Olympics is on, by the name of Florence Chadwick. She was the first woman swimmer to swim the English Channel. A few years after that, she wanted to swim from Catalina Islands to California. It's about a 21-mile stretch. She began to swim. And as Florence swam that day, there was a heavy fog that set in. The fog was so bad that she could not even see where she was going. She had to just keep swimming blindly towards the shore. Eventually, she got tired, and her bones were aching, and she was exhausted. She couldn't see where she was going, and she said, I just can't do it. And she got in the boat. When she got in the boat and she was able to stand, and as the boat began to go towards the shore, she realized she was only a half a mile away from finishing. She went 20 and a half miles. She only had another half a mile to go, and she would have finished that. And then she says, I'm going to do this again. 2 months later, she attempted it again. It's another foggy day, and she can't see, but she kept swimming. And when she wanted to give up, she would see that mental picture of that when she was staying in the boat of the shore line. And that kept her going. Even though she couldn't physically see, mentally, she could see the shoreline. And she made it all the way across. For you and I, let's don't stop. We're almost there to living with God forever. We've got to swim. We've got to journey with a mental picture that heaven is real, that Jesus has a mansion for you and I, and that one day we're going to live with him. For just like he said in John, he goes to prepare a place for us. If we don't keep that in mind, we'll get discouraged as we look at our world that we're living in. I've been really, and I'm closing now, but I've been really struggling about in my spirit with how do we live in these last days? Because I don't know if you realize it or not, America has changed upside down in the last 10 years. We are not the same country we were 10 years ago. And I really believe, because when you look at the Old Testament and you look at like Habakkuk, who did God judge first? Israel, his church. I really sense, and I may be wrong, I'm no prophet, but I really believe that the church in America is going to be judged first as we go through this time of season that we're in. I really believe that as we continue to go, man, the attack on the church is going to get harder and harder and harder. And I think in many ways it's needed, because I think most people play church. Most people that get up and go to church on Sunday morning across our country, they're just going because it's a social thing to do. They're not really committed to selling all out to God. And I think this time will be needed in order to get the church where it needs to be. But how do we live in that? How did the remnant live? So I begin to study, I'm studying Daniel like crazy. Because I think there are a lot of things from Daniel that tell us how we ought to live in this time. Wednesday night, I shared from the story of Nahum and the little girl, not really a little girl, but a young teenager who was caught and stood up and said, Nahum, you know, there's a prophet where I come from that can heal you. In a time when her dream was taken away from her, in a time where she should have looked at Nahum and said, well, that's just a curse of God upon you. That's because you took me, and this is what happens to you. That's why you got leprosy, and you're going to die. And she should have silently been going, yes, yes, yes. But instead, she went, no. There's a God in heaven who loves you, Nahum, and who wants to heal you. In spite of all that, how do we live in this time? And what lines do we draw? Because I think we're going to need to decide the lines that we draw. What lines? What am I not going to allow? I'm not going to give in on. If they say this, I'm going to say, no, I can't work here anymore. If they say this, I'm going to say, no, I can't do that because it violates my faith. What lines are necessary to draw during this age that we live in? I think one of the things that the Lord has been showing me is you've got to see the end game. You've got to remember that our King wins in the end. And that heaven awaits us. That just like we're swimming that shore, we've got a picture of the heaven we're going to. Because that helps us when we're living through this time period that we're living in, where we're going to have to draw some lines in the sand, where we're going to have to make some stands for God that are going to be really tough and really hard. I think we're going to have to understand, wait a minute, we're not living for this kingdom. We're living for a kingdom to come, and it's only a few more years, and guess what? He's either coming back or I'm going to be with him, but I'm living for heaven. And I've seen a glimpse of heaven, and it's too good to miss out on. It's too good to pass up on. That I am living for something because I understand God's grace to me. You know? I think when you understand that God is a gracious God and what he's forgiven you of and what he's done in your life, it spurs you on to keep on living for your God. We have a shepherd. And in the middle of all this turmoil, we shall not want. We have a shepherd that will meet every spiritual need we have. We have a shepherd that will meet every directional need we have. We have a shepherd that will meet every physical need we have, whether it's in our body or whether it's in a need that we have financially. God will supply the need. For the righteous will not go begging bread. God will supply our need. We have a shepherd who will take care of our every emotional need that we have. We have a shepherd who will take care of our eternal need, who will take care of his people. We shall not want, for he has a rod that's full of power, and he has a staff that's full of his grace. We have a shepherd.